Welcome back to stage 6 of this demo lesson. At the end of stage 5, this is the infrastructure that you finished with. You've got the two environments on-premise on the right, AWS on the left. You've got the two-way forest trust that's been created between the two implementations of Active Directory, the AWS one on the left, the on-premises on the right. You've implemented FSx, which is a Windows-based file share as a service product provided by AWS. And you've demonstrated how you can access this from on-premises using the distributed file system, or DFS, and I've demonstrated one simple way of how you can migrate data from on-premises through to AWS. Now, in this stage of the demo series, you're going to create a workspace, which is a desktop as a service product by AWS. And normally you create a workspace for an identity of a directory within AWS. But because we've configured this two-way forest trust between the on-premises Active Directory, so ad.animalsforlife.org, we're going to be able to benefit from this domain trust in order to create a workspace for the on-premises administrator. That's what we're going to do in this stage of the demo lesson, so let's jump in and get started. Now that we've got the two-way forest trust configured, creating and using a workspace is relatively easy. Now, to get to workspaces, we could click on the services drop-down and type work in and then click on workspaces, and that would take us directly to the workspaces console. Then click on workspaces and then create workspaces. You'll need to select an AWS directory. So this is one service which requires an AWS managed directory. And this is one of the reasons why we had to create this two-way forest trust, because when we've got a directory on premises, the only options that we have to either configure an AWS managed Active Directory, so a full implementation, which is what we've done, or use the AD connector. Now, the AD connector has the problem that it's reliant on network connectivity. So if the network link between the AWS environment and the on-premises environment fails, then workspaces will also fail. So because in this scenario we're looking to migrate users and resources from one side, so the on-premises side, into the AWS side, the best way is to create this trust between two independent directories. Now, in this stage of the demo lesson, we're going to provision access to a workspace for a user within the on-premises directory. But over time, if this were a real-world migration, you'd begin migrating users from the on-premises Active Directory through to the AWS directory. And so it makes sense that Workspaces is configured to use the AWS directory. The intended location long-term will be the AWS-based directory. And so we're configuring the workspaces to use that as the directory. And so to allow this directory to be used with workspaces, we need to select the directory and then click on register. And we need to select two different subnets to use. Now, workspaces aren't available in every subnet within AWS, and this is one of the reasons why I created the CloudFormation template to create 4 different subnets at the AWS side. So we need to select any 2 subnets in different availability zones. So click on the Subnet 1 drop-down box and pick one of the available subnets. Now, all you see in this list is subnet IDs and side arrangers. So we need to know which subnets each of these maps onto. So you should still have a tab open to the VPC console. If you do, click on subnets. If you don't, you'll need to open a new tab to the VPC console and then click subnets. Now, we want to use the AWS side private subnets. So private A, private B, private C, or private D. Now, the easiest way to do this is to look at the IP address ranges that these subnets use. So 32, 96, 160, and 224. So we need to select 2 subnets from this list. So let's have a look. So go back to the Workspaces console, and we're going to pick one of these subnets. So I'm going to pick 10.16.32.0, and I need to make sure that that's one of the private subnets. So just checking, 10.16.32, yep, that's private A, so that's good. Then in subnet 2, I need to pick a different availability zone. So I have 1016, 48, 160 and 224, and I need to pick one of those that's a private subnet. So let's move back to the VPC console. 160 and 224 both are private subnets, so either of those will be acceptable. So I'm going to pick 1C, so US East 1C. So that's configuring which directory workspaces are registered to and which subnets the workspaces themselves will be provisioned into. Okay, so now we've set those, go ahead and click on Register. You'll be taken back to the previous screen, so now that this directory is registered for use with workspaces, we can select it and click on Next. And now we're going to create a user that can use this workspace, and this user is going to be within the on-premises directory. Even though this workspace is within AWS, because we have this forest trust, we're going to use an on-premises directory user. Now, in order to allow that, we have to click on the drop-down and change it to the on-premises directory. So under Trusted Domains, click on the drop-down and select ad.animalsforlife.org. Now, because this is a trusted directory, you can't create users directly within the AWS console, but you can select them. So to do that, go ahead and click on Next. And this shows us the current users listed in the on-premises directory. So we have admin and administrator. Now, just to demonstrate how this works, I'm going to go ahead and have you create a brand new user within the on-premises directory. It's going to be an admin user, but we're going to call it A4L admin. Now, to do that, I need you to move to the on-premises environment. Now, you should still have this open. Remember, we have a connection through to the client machine using the on-premises Jumpbox. If you don't have this open, check this stage's instructions for details of how you can connect again. Assuming you're connected, go ahead and open Active Directory Users and Computers. Select Users. Right-click, New, and then User. Now for first name and last name, go ahead and enter A4L admin. Put A4L admin as well for the user logon name, and make sure @ad.animalsforlife.org is selected in the drop-down to the right. Once you've done that, go ahead and click on Next. Set a suitable password, and you'll need to confirm that password, and then uncheck user must change password at next logon, and check the box saying password never expires, and then click on Next. Verify everything looks good and you've made no typos, and then click on Finish. Now at this point, double click on the A4L admin user, and I'll want you to go ahead and enter an email address. Now this needs to be a valid email address. I'm going to go ahead and enter my email. You should put a valid email that you control. Once you've done that, click on the Member Of tab, because we're going to make this user a member of the Enterprise Admin group. So click on Add, type Enterprise Admin or Enterprise Admins and click on Check Names. It should confirm the name Enterprise Admins, and then you can click on OK. Click on OK again to close down this dialog. Then you can move back to the AWS console and hit refresh. And now you should see this brand new created A4L admin user. Now note in my case, I don't see an email address in the email column. Hit refresh a few times and it should appear. If it doesn't, just go ahead and select the user, click on Next, and then go back and refresh, and then you should see the email displayed. Once you do, you can make sure the user is still selected, click on Next, and now you'll have to select the type of workspace to provision. So click on the Any Hardware drop-down and select Standard, and I want you to go ahead and select the most recent workspace, which is free tier eligible. Now in my case, that's Standard with Windows 10 2019 based, but depending on when you're watching this demo, that may be different. Just make sure that you select Standard, which is free tier eligible with a version of Windows, and pick the most recent version available. Once you've done that, click on Next. You can choose between the running modes, so always on and auto stop. Auto stop saves significant costs, so we're going to use that, and we're going to make sure that it's set for number of hours 1. Then click on Next. We won't change any of these settings. Click on Next again. Review everything looks good. It does. And then click on Create Workspaces. Now, although that is still in a pending state, what you can do to save some time, if you just click on the workspace ID on the left, you'll see a clients link, and this is a link where you can download the Workspaces client. So go ahead and copy that into your clipboard, and then in a new tab, go to that link and you'll see client downloads for various different operating systems. Now I'm recording this on macOS, but there are also downloads available for Windows, iPad, Android, Chromebook, Fire Tablet. There's a web access method as well as a Linux client available, so you should pick the one that's relevant for the operating system that you're running. In my case, I'm running macOS, so I'll click on Download to download Workspaces. Once it's downloaded, open the package, and the exact installation process will depend on your operating system, but just go through and accept all of the default prompts, and then allow the installation to complete. Once it's completed, you can close the installation down, and when you start up the application, the first thing that it will ask for is a registration code. And you can get that registration code from the AWS console under the workspace. It's still expanded, and you'll see a registration code listed there. Copy that into your clipboard, put that into the client, and then click on Register. Now that will take you to a login page where you'll need to log into this workspace, and this will need the workspace to be in a fully ready state before continuing. So go ahead and pause the video, and we're going to wait now for the workspace to be ready to go. Now at this point, the workspace is provisioned, and because we've provisioned it against a Microsoft Active Directory, we can go ahead and log in directly. So move across to the Workspaces client, and then the easiest way to log in is use the username and password for the admin user of the on-premises directory. Now we'll use the short form domain name, so this is A4L, so that's the NetBIOS version of the name of the on-premises domain, so A4L / and then A4L admin, which is the user in the on-premises directory that this workspace has been created for, and then the password that you've set for this user. So type in that password and then click on Sign In, and you'll be signed into the workspace using the admin user of the on-premises Active Directory. So again, this is only possible because we've configured this two-way forest trust between the AWS Active Directory and the on-premises Active Directory. Now we can go ahead and maximize the view for this workspace, and now we've got access to an AWS hosted desktop as a service, which is utilizing this two-way forest trust between these two Active Directories. Now because we migrated our files using a distributed file system namespace from the on-premises file server through to FSx in the previous part of this demo series, we can access them by opening Windows Explorer. And once that's open, just go to this box, do a /ad.animalsforlife.org / private, and then press enter. And this will use the DFS namespace. Now if we try to go into this folder, it will just hang or give us an error, and it's important that you understand why that is. When you create workspaces, when you select a directory to use, the Workspaces product actually creates a number of security groups. If we go back to the AWS console, click on Services, type VPC and open that in a new tab, and then scroll down and click on Security Groups. And then if we expand this to make it easier to see, you'll note that we have a Workspaces Members security group, and this is the security group that's attached to any workspaces that we launch. Now if we look at inbound rules, there are no inbound rules on this security group, and on outbound rules we've got all traffic being allowed to all destinations. Now the workspace does not have the default instance security group associated with it, and this is preventing the workspace from accessing any of the other infrastructure that we've deployed. So to fix this, copy the security group ID next to the Workspace Members security group. Once you've got that, we need to allow the workspaces to connect to the FSx file share. So go ahead and look for the security group that has AWS VPC in the name as well as instance SG. So this is the default A4L AWS security group. So make sure the description is default A4L AWS SG and select that security group and then edit the inbound rules. And we're going to add a new rule. We're going to allow all traffic from this security group ID, so the Workspaces security group ID. So enter that, scroll down and click on Save. And now we've edited this security group to allow any access from our workspace. So if we return back to our workspace and now try to access this folder, now we can get into this folder and access the Animals for Life corporate file store. So there are a few moving parts that you need to be aware of when you're configuring a hybrid environment, and one of them is to realize that you need your routing and security configured correctly to allow the workspaces to access your on-premises or AWS-based networks. So all of the other infrastructure that's configured as part of this demonstration uses this default instance security group. The security group is used for our simulated on-premises environment, and it's also used for our AWS environment. And that's why when we connected to the on-premises network and we connected to the client server, we could access both the on-premises file server and the FSx-based file share. And that's because both of those were configured to use this instance security group. But because we're now using workspaces which use a different security group, we needed to adjust the configuration of this security group to allow access. Now at this point that's one single workspace, but if this was a production migration, there would be nothing stopping you launching workspaces for all of your on-premises organization. You could start a process of migrating all of your resources, so maybe your application servers, your file servers, and picking either self-managed or as a service products within AWS. So rather than hosting your own file servers, you could use FSx. You might decide to migrate your application servers as is onto EC2 or investigate re-architecting them onto a different type of architecture, maybe serverless or using platform as a service such as Elastic Beanstalk. In any case, now that you have routing configured between these two environments, now that you have a two-way forest trust, you can begin the long-term process of migrating identities and resources from one environment to the other. But with that being said, that is everything that you needed to do in this part of the demo series. I just wanted to give you the practical experience of launching a workspace, not in an AWS native directory, but using the two-way forest trust between AWS and on-premises. And you've done that. So at this point in the demo series, you should be relatively comfortable deploying AWS-based directories, configuring trusts between them, and then using resources from one directory with identities from the other. Now this is the last activity part of this demo series. In the next stage of the demo series, you're going to tear down all of this infrastructure and return it to the same state as it was at the start of the lesson. So go ahead, complete this video, and then when you're ready, you can join me in the last part of this demo series where you'll clean up your AWS account.